Good afternoon, Abbotsford residents. Today I want to bring you a special podcast today, and I want to make sure that Abbotsford residents fully understand today in a clear, laid out video of why I took this approach with Abbotsford seniors and homeowners. And number one, why such a heavy approach on assholes at the Abbotsford police that ran in uniform and figured under uniform I could carry out abuse. There's two reasons. One, for the body of law, and two, so you never have to look over your shoulder who Henry Braun paid off now to do him a personal favor. I want to say thanks to the RCMP mission who helped these homeowners and helped us. Not the RCMP pissed on another police force. They were doing what was right by the body of law and what's right by a human being, and knowing their scope of the body of law and what a democracy is, what the law requires, and when it's off kilter. It was innocently caught, you might say, by the RCMP, but they knew it was wrong. So first of all, thanks to the Mission RCMP, Abbotsford homeowners, and myself. Today I want to show you what cameras could do. A person came forward about that protest, and I want you just to watch this. This is the officer, then I'll elaborate on it, that caused Henry's hit and run with Henry. Gertie Pretty.
For the toll, Mr. Pelican? Where's Mr. Pelican? Are you going to move your vehicle? Am I calling for the... Can you get a Jack's toll at a right there?
Okay, so that's Gertie Purdy, 310 Gert. So let me elaborate and let me take place what happened. Henry Brown lobbied a job next to his piece of property that would bring lifts. Henry had council in his house overweighing the general community. For years in and out, when Henry took city, he was using the majority of city councils called Abbotsford First and Dave Lowens to outrule the general community. I saw many people leave the city crying, knowing that there wasn't fair process through the city. Henry was jacking them through Nancy Friesen to come upstairs and not in front of the city auditorium. All that was wrong. Cooper's Farm, all them people went out leaving, and he cried, I got it, through all the lifts. Henry had this in the bag, but it was Henry's son that leaked it. But how Henry accomplished this was when you went to your MLA, Mike DeJong, and your MP, Ed Fast. They were both working side by side with Henry all the time. Never saying to Henry, Ed was a former council, I believe, saying to Henry, what the hell are you doing interfering in this process? You can't do that. It's got to go before auditorium. That is why Mogil said there was smoke, there was fire. What brings me here? What caused this? Abbotsford homeowners had their houses damaged, very badly damaged, little families, seniors, and myself. I know the process from city to city and working with Wall and Aquilini, Mike Dakotas. I told you I built the North Shore Pier, the World Olympics. That the process of that kind of negligence by the contractor, the city supposed to go after its bond and everything it did. Henry Brown didn't do that. Braun didn't do that. His son, Darren Braun, was approving officer. Ross took over, was the deputy mayor for Henry's illegal act to bring it. Henry helped all the processes of city engineers, city inspectors, and everything to come up to the mountain and help them homeowners or do any diligence. None at all. Rob Isaac, none of them. Using uniform as leverage over the general community. But Henry also used Tyler Olson, who was Rick Rakes, was a pro-editor. He was Henry's best friend for the Abbotsford News, Vicky Hopes and Ken, to cover this on these victims. Abbotsford residents and me protested here in the Abbotsford back of the city parking lot with our vehicles, had signs on it, that Henry Brown called an East Indian woman a dumb brown cow, meaning me and him should work together, that we were white, and bury her. The RCMP admission said I wouldn't stand for that, and that's proving. You can even ask them. Henry sent this officer, Gertie Purdy, 310 Gertie Purdy. Gertie jumped out of his car, and that was a video you just saw, threatening to tow. And I knew it was wrong when I went to the RCMP because they said, where's Gertie Purdy when all the protests for the trucking convoy? And where's Gertie Purdy on Soji where people are posting their signs and damaging city property? They weren't. Henry was worried about the controversy and the press getting it So he ordered Gertie Purdy to do that. Gertie Purdy, you can see him using intimidation and what he was trying to do, but his intimidation didn't work. I wasn't going to allow them homeowners to be upset, them seniors and them people. I moved them uptown. That's when Henry came out in his Lexus car, hit and ran me, fled from the scene, which you heard that audio tape. But then Mike Schur and his detachment covered it. When I knew that much what was going on and this back players were scamming this city and inflating jobs and lifting jobs with Ron Funk and Diverse and everything it doing, it had Mike DeJong and Ed Fast right involved. 100% involved, up to their nuts, you might say. I ran for mayor, thanks to the RCMP, and I put a team together. I saw Henry Brown during the federal election. When Ed was running, he sent the electoral officer out to take Juddy Sadu of Trudeau's signs all down, right in front of Tyler Olson's newspaper. I saw him do it to Bruce Banwell's electoral officer, and I saw what he did to Mogel. I had laid that all out to my campaign people and everybody else, but I saw Henry use the Abbotsford police to bust Mogel up down at the Salvation Army. That meant that order had to come out of the mayor's office. They were owning their own Abbotsford police. But the MLA, who should have stopped it, didn't, because he needed them private police for his protection when he had his illegal party at Bell Road, not to be scandaled. And the Abbotsford police did that. So there was no longer a law enforcement. It was these guys were running violence on Abbotsford residents, and it was to take over the city at any cost. The SS, they were called. But Henry was setting up, like the New York mob did, to control it. It took a ring of players. So I want to lay out them ring of players. Thanks to Henry's own son, and working with the Mission RCMP, some of the Surrey, and in the Vancouver PD, which when I worked, I always went in and saw them, outlined the push to see what Tyler Olson and Vicky Hopes of the Abbotsford News would do for them victims. They covered it. Henry's son lied out that Henry brought the Abbotsford newspaper on board for half the city advertising. In return, you don't write any stories on me. Henry was using every leverage there was to get his friends, jobs, and everything. Darren Brown showed me when Sandy Blue and these people took over how they were at Henry's house, and the next night, I need you to pass my job sites. He also gave me who was sitting on the police foundation, on the police board, Sandy Blue. He got me his uncle, Henry's brother, Erwin Braun, on the board, and Henry loaded the whole board. But the Abbotsford police, this didn't do that. The Abbotsford police, Keelan Olenoff, was going to Henry's house and got caught lying. There was break-ins, there was millions of dollars. Then he threatened Abbotsford residents, myself included, right there was residents, to drop a video and lawsuit against Henry Brown or I will personally fucking bury you. Abbotsford Police's job in policing are supposed to put people in witness protection program or defend the person that's going to testify. They didn't. They went out and threatened that. That brought me to the conclusion of how long these dirty son of a bitches been using media, the leverage of Mike DeYoung and Ed Fast, to cover their filthy scam under their uniform. I saw people being victimized every day under this company. But because they wore the uniform allowed them to do it. So when I stood forward in the mayor election, I stood forward not only to clean Abbotsford, forensic audit Abbotsford, bring the RCMP, and catch the undercurrent that was flowing under Abbotsford. Henry Brown, job sites and lifts, and Darren Brown was elaborating and showing it. Diverse, Ron Funk, people going in, homeowners were waiting up to 2 years for building permits, Henry going after the dikes, and all this. The other day, I outlined, you saw Henry Brown on the center of the stage with no MPs and no MLAs and no Bruce Banman, who said he would protect that. The other day in his speech, not speaking. It was Henry and Ross trying to get that money from Trudeau. Trudeau's probably realized you took my MP signs, Juddy Sadu and Seamus's down to load Ed Fast, and this what was going. You saw Ed Fast quit. I don't believe Ed Fast is called quits because Ed Fast would hold that position because he hates what Mike DeYoung did. He's fleeing because he knows what's coming. As a sitting MP, he was tied to Henry on the corruption. But this is what carried out the abuse, the Abbotsford police. It carried it out. Not only was it involved in problems, it had no forensic audits on its crime it was doing to Abbotsford residents. No more accountability in front of the city because Henry shut down open mic. Just like he dismantled the Dyke Committee so the farmers wouldn't be protected because he wanted to teach Mogill a lesson, the councils that were getting paid. Then there was no more you could go in front of the city and say, last night Dave Lowens went in front of Blue Ridge on private property and took my signs down and nailed his up. Dave Lowens, the city council. Then you could go and say, last night in front of many witnesses, Gabriel was ordered and went out, electoral officer, and took my signs. Nobody could go in front of the city. Henry figured he could block that between Vicky Hopes and Canada newspaper and the Abbotsford police, touching the elections. So when I ran to be a voice for Abbotsford, to restructure Abbotsford, financial Abbotsford, and go after the organized crime. That meant I had to take the Abbotsford police on because the officers at the top were being paid out the back door to carry them threats. As one officer said, the staff sergeant, when Olenoff got caught going to Henry's house, he goes to do a bead off of Henry's you-know-what every morning, but then rather than working here. That meant he owned him. And you could see that week after week after week after week after week after week after week what they were doing. So the Abbotsford police were no longer being a police force or governing. They were becoming an organization of how much. That meant to me I had to search and find out how many officers been paid, how much stuff has Gertie Purdy did for Henry Brown, how many police complaints have been elected and complained against. Donna Macy goes, Mark Sears, the secretary, was Bob Rich, and blocked it. So when I went after the Abbotsford police, I didn't go after law enforcement. I went after the men and women that signed up, that took the uniform, and now we're creating organized crime. Henry had their personal numbers. I knew Henry would lobby to Mike and Ed to keep the private police. It was their only way for them to stay out of problem with the law, or for the RCMP to come in and seize their files and go through them for insider trading, threatening, racketeering, lifting lands and jobs. But it took a collaborating team, so I want to explain. Henry Braun was the mayor of Abbotsford. Darren Brown showed me how rich his dad was, and Ed Fast was licking his ass. Ed Fast was the former MP, he still is the MP, for Pierre Poilievre's party, the Federal Conservatives. Ed was covering that rather than haul Henry out, that you threatened residents, you damaged the residents' houses, Henry. You blocked all city officers from going up there doing any reports. Without reports, they were going to be struggled. Then you also had Mike DeYoung tell Abbotsford residents, you cut a deal, Henry runs and owns Abbotsford. And you allowed Mike DeYoung's illegal party. These were the underground players. But Henry was formally tied to Rick Rakes, the pro-editor of Abbotsford News, that could cover and block the whole stories on Abbotsford and what was taking place, because it would pull the whole establishment down. That meant when you're doing that much, like Vicky Hopes did, and Ken did, blocked me in the election, helped me out of the election, covered Dave Sadu's threat at UFV, covered Abbotsford First saying I sexually groped them at the sports center, and Abbotsford police weren't charging. It was the RCMP said, Mr. Pelican, to Abbotsford residents, you need to witness that because that's their scope of work. And if they can't do their scope of work, then they got to be let go. That is why I turned to the world stage and used the video thanks to Abbotsford residents and everybody, because these people were being victimized. Every single day, the Abbotsford police were victimized. When I saw Henry being jammed because I called the mayorship and he fled, he needed to carry out them stupid deals and them scams with Diverse and that money that Trudeau was promising. But it also had the MLA Pamela Alexis involved. The former mayor of Mission was covering it. She covered Henry's lifting the election. She should have called it out as the NDP and said the Liberals directly were aware of, Mike DeYoung was directly aware of, that Mr. Pelican was blocked at the city auditorium. Mike DeYoung was directly aware of Greg Cho's inducting Ross Siemens into the Chamber of Commerce months in advance over all the other mayors, giving him the lead, which is unfair in the election, and it's election loading and buying. And she should have called that all out. She didn't. She buckled because her and Mike DeYoung were best friends. You do my favor, I'll do your favor. I won't complain of all the money that you've been lobbying in here. So they used Abbotsford because it was no longer a police force and it didn't have the RCMP like Mission and Chilliwack to launder all this money because it wouldn't go in under investigations. And friends, just like you saw Vitalis's 25 million and you saw Andy Sadu sell his piece of property on Tracy Road quickly and it's up for development, and go look who's trying to develop that and go look at it with Brian Cadet. You saw the bog on Farmer Road, all them people getting sick. You saw the contaminated soil out of the old hospital site. You saw what Henry did. You saw Henry take money out of the coffers to pave downs. But an attempted murder went too far. When we left with them seniors, we went uptown and you could hear Gertz, or you could hear one Gertie Purdy when he's threatening. Gertie Purdy figured that police invitation always scares everybody to go running. I took them seniors and I moved uptown when Henry came out in that Lexus car and came right at me. He didn't bat an eye. Hit and ran me and then fled in the Lexus car, flipping over the curb, and then put me in the hospital where my son managed my job for 2 months. And these guys went and said, go fuck yourself. We're not charging Henry Brown. It had to be an upper establishment that would protect it. Darren Brown showed me how Mike DeYoung and Ed Fast were no longer holding the office that they were asked to serve and protect Canadians and their local residents, but they laid in bed with Henry Brown and it became an organized crime of crime. They needed this, the Abbotsford Police. The Abbotsford Police should have never done that. These were the men and women that weren't going to do policing, they were going to do that. Henry Brown knew when I ran for mayor, the 71 million he was stealing was getting the job into Unitec's hands, and Unitec all of a sudden got jobs through the whole of Abbotsford, so he could scam that money and get kickbacks. When Darren Brown, his own flesh and blood, said, for 5 million we can renovate that building, they're stealing that money and a lot of money's going out the back doors. Darren was probably jealous that he was struggling as a father with his kid and his wife, and these guys were scamming and making millions. He figured out their scam. And he knew that. So Henry needed that 71 million. When I said I'm coming in, I'm going to stop it, Manji Soy. So Henry knew the election was going to be jammed. It was going to change to either Manji Soy or Mr. Pelican. Henry knew he couldn't beat me when I had Bill Vanderson. So he asked Greg Toes to buy me the night of the chamber. I'll pay you all your money, your signs, everything you're out. We let Ross run because we need Ross in to lift this job, scam the money. I need Ross to scam the money down on the newspapers for Diverse. I need Ross to scam the money over on Vitalis. I need Ross to scam the money in behind the hospital. But I knew Ross wasn't doing it. You ever heard of firing the rifle off of somebody else's shoulder? Henry loaded Ross Siemens. And I knew that when the money was being struggled and being caught and being jammed, Henry would have to step up himself because Ross wasn't being aggressive enough. Henry then had to phone Vicky Hopes and Ken in the newspaper and say, I need a nice article. Then Henry tried the impossible. He tried to take Trudeau on for all the money, and he pulled the other mayors in, which was wrong, rather than the MLAs and MPs, because they just looked at it and said, you're bloody scamming this shit. And he leveraged up there that Trudeau promised me, Trudeau promised me. But if you notice this, Henry went to Marion Moscadam on the flood, and he told her young lady, let water be under the bridge and drop this lawsuit. They called me because that old lady was being threatened. Class action by Abbotsford farmers, well deserved, well deserved for Henry's neglect. Henry dismantled the Dyke Committee, what Mo sat on. He didn't service them pumps, but here's the question. 71 million going into the pumps, that's unnecessary. If you look at the building, the square footage of the building doesn't require that 71 million. Somebody's getting 20 million or 30 million off the top of it. And you do the fits of the pumps. So the question is to see who's going to get it. Miro Contracting, Henry's Front, the Unitec, and we'll see who them contractors are. But this went out of hand by Abbotsford Police. And then the Abbotsford Police did this, ladies and gentlemen. They sat for 2 months at my house in their black cars, ringing me. Nobody would ever kick my ass, they said. We're police officers. They used this confidence in this uniform till they abused it. And they abused it. Nobody will get rid of me. I sit upstairs and I worry about the gangs and the task force. Crime itself in Abbotsford has dropped off since you've seen me attack the Abbotsford Police. Wait out. Cauliflower Ears has been in here for months. Ross hasn't took a picture with him. Or nothing. Cauliflower Ears stands by himself is nothing. The break between Abbotsford residents and the Abbotsford Police were no longer a public or a community police. It was self-run, and it was doing dictatorship just like Adolf Hitler did. And it did this. But they kept using Mike DeYoung, Vicky Hopes, and the Abbotsford News to do that. They went far too far. They crossed the body of law. They went into threatening families. They went into lifting and loading and rigging elections. They went into money scams. And this is what they were doing. And they accomplished this because the three leaders were the MLA, the MP, and Henry Brown. They should have never laid beside them people. They should have held their office separate from them and the body of the law. It didn't take Abbotsford residents to become all of a sudden police officers, go through mission and all the police forces, and be told how to video film and all this and lay this out and run in the election and fly them out because of these lazy assholes. Now these assholes get well paid to run around in your Dodge Chargers in the middle of the winter with no chains and no snow tires and slam into people. These assholes get well paid to jump on your community cars that your tax dollars go to damage them. These assholes get well paid to stand up there and dump ice on each other, endangering each other's life. These assholes got well paid to go down to by the Paviotti's restaurant, pick up a hawker in their company car on your tax dollars. These assholes got well paid to smash somebody in the face and do that. These assholes got well paid to take their big GMC vehicles over to the keg and siphon gas out of it. These assholes never stopped because there was nobody governing these assholes. Henry was too busy lifting lands and trying to get the money in from the federal and provincial government that would reward him and no longer going to tendering. But these assholes were number one in doing it. As much as they tell me every day, you know it was Henry, you know it was Henry, you know it was Henry, you know it was Henry and Ross. They did it. They accomplished it. It was their cars in front of my house for 2 months, the task force. It was them. And then they turn to the media and they go, gangs, gangs. Oh, the chief and his shithole company want to tell you about fucking gangs, gangs. These assholes did this to families. When I went and assembled the best team, I assembled it thanks to the Mission RCMP. And never, ever did I tell the RCMP back off. The RCMP said, we're with you. This is unheard of what was taking place in Abbotsford. I'm asking Abbotsford residents and other municipalities to join us now on what you saw and be with me and Abbotsford residents and Abbotsford victims who were victimized. And I'll show you, like I laid it, Ed Fast, Mike DeYoung, Henry Brown, Vicky Hopes, Ken, Ross Siemens, these were the players. The only man that had any balls in this whole thing was Ross's dad when he came. And he knew what Abbotsford first did with the sex charges they tried to get me dropped out so Ross could win. They knew with my election signs, they knew what Dave Solones did. And he said, God awful, man. This should have been ended behind the back doors. But that couldn't be ended because Henry wasn't a man. Henry lived on downs and created evil, filthy acts to get rich. The thing is, Abbotsford residents have to go through Mike DeYoung's finances and Ed's finances and see all the jobs they lobbied in when they were in government office and how rich they came. And this is what was taking place. Then, not only did that, they bought yourself personal protection. Mike DeYoung had that illegal party at Bell Road to endorse Dave Sadu, which he owed because Marcus Dalvis ran him. Dave owned the Capriccio newspaper and he owed Dave with Marcus on his riding association. But the Abbotsford police should have never blocked that. They should have went out and got 66 people, including the former mayor George Perry, Mike DeYoung, Dave Sadu, and Marcus Dalvis, intoxicated, drugs on the property, and driving and fleeing from that and not allowed to gather. They didn't, because Henry Brown ordered that to be stopped. It was a mission RCMP said, take people down there and witness it in a video film it. This is all illegal. This is what was taking place. So now you have to see of how we want to save the company. They've been good. They've been laying here, we've been good, we've been good. You know, it doesn't matter how you're going to save the company. Henry and they owe each other. Keeping them on, they'll still do Henry the favor. And I don't want to be a resident with these seniors that brought this and went this far in world stage to always look over my shoulder of how when Henry went in here and paid the officer. This new piece of shit, cauliflower ears, is just what I tell you, a piece of shit. He should have came up to them victims. He should have came up and he should have ended it and said, I'm going to wipe out the whole force and rebuild. And Abbotsford residents would have helped rebuild or brought the RCMP. But it was going to benefit Henry, Mike DeYoung, and Ed Fast. I know Mike DeYoung being tied to Pam will lean into Pam and say, you got to get David Eby to take mercy on the bloody thing, and we got to do it. David Eby's so far down in the polls because he's not doing right for the voters, and it looks like David Eby's just flooding the money into Abbotsford. I'm done anyways. The Conservatives are going to win the election. So how much can I get in and dump into Vitalis and all these job sites, and when I'm out, remember what I did for you. It calls for the Conservatives, like I said on the pump, to question it. But 71 million was frauded. 71 million they could come up to, and they couldn't help the farmers. 71 million they couldn't fix the pumps. And they were scamming this. But this was all done under Henry Brown. It was never done under George Perry, never done under Bruce Bannon, never done under that. Henry went in and owned it and mobbed it. The Abbotsford police don't need another chance. They had plenty of time to apologize. They had plenty of time to do what was right. They didn't. They kept using their sympathy, our uniform, look at the name, look at the name, look at the bloody name. They're asking for your tax increase to fund organized crime. That's what it is. It's organized crime. No residents. And like I say, these little families and victims shouldn't have had to go on the mission. Vicky Hopes played a great part in that. She blocked all the advertising with Ken and figured she was smarter than the former premier and his MLAs that helped me. And nobody will come after Vicky for loading the election and frauding the election. I'm smart. You know how smart she is? She don't even got her picture no more in the newspaper because she's trying to disguise herself. She loaded an election with Ross Siemens to benefit Ross Siemens, and she used the Abbotsford News to restrict voters from seeing the corruption and voters from having a fair election and voters from saying, Ross Siemens did this, and then she halted Ross's all his scams, his dirt, his gas station knockdown, his illegal contempt on the homeowner's site, and all this. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm asking you to come together before our taxes are due, from municipality to municipality. And let's stand up for the body of law and law enforcement. And let's protest to remove the Abbotsford police. And remove them once and for all. They should have never got owned. They never went to try to solve this problem, correct this problem, or nothing. When it went on them, they just carried out more vicious threats by their high-ranking officers. We have to look at everything they've been involved in and go through. Organized crime was probably run by them and set up by them, and they were controlling it because Henry was so well big in this stuff and wrecking the elections and tampering the elections. He would have moved into organized crime knowing that the Abbotsford police, okay, you go raid that $5 million worth of drugs there and we'll sell it offshore. And this is what a criminal does when he's gone this far. They weren't about law enforcement because these families should have never got that. They weren't about law enforcement or the taxpayers because you should have never took the company cars. You got a lot of top officers that compromised and were doing organized crime in the top. There is no if, buts, or maybe they gotta go. They can't be transferred to another police force because they compromised this, they'll compromise that. But took the mission RCMP to help these victims, these families, and stand up and say, Mr. Pelican, run in the election, and then they all go to help. This man took that MLA position and abused it. Then he covered up the election loading, the election fraud, and this. Mike DeYoung's trying to run for Ed Fast's position against the other candidates for MP of the federal Conservatives. A liberal, a dirty, filthy man trying to run this. He's not running to help Abbotsford or anything. He's fucked everything there was up, from ICBC to everything he was involved in. He's running for protection, knowing that the Conservative seat's a strong seat. Here's a man that stood by when this election was blocked, like Pierre Polly had said, you may not like Jordan Peterson, you can't block. Allowed that block and helped that block. Here's a man that said, Henry owns Abbotsford, you cut a deal. Henry never owned Abbotsford, because I never sold out, and neither did the Abbotsford homeowners or any resident. Henry owned his ass, and owned it lock, stock, and barrel. The problem is how much money did they get off of Abbotsford taxpayers and out of the federal and provincial government to benefit them. So today, ladies and gentlemen, I'm asking you, and you'll see more podcasts, come together with me and Abbotsford residents and these victims, and let's protest to remove the Abbotsford police. Right out. That will call upon the federal government to step in because it had the provincial government's hands, Pamela Alexis, involved. What should have took place when this was taking place, right now, Mike Sears should have stood it down. He should have called the Attorney General and said, we got a big problem. The mayor's got these guys. The mayor's paid these guys. The mayor's, they've been to the mayor's house. The mayor's asked them to block elections. The mayor's asking them to threat residents. They didn't. The police name will take it. Vicky Hopes next week will do another story of this. This ain't a democracy. This is organized crime. And this should never took place on residents. The Abbotsford police bet their ass that this could never catch them. They did, because of Darren Braun, Henry's own son, when he leaked how Henry loaded the police board, how they were all in Henry's bed and they were all